Hello, and welcome to Elections Daily's coverage of the Massachusetts primaries. Regardless of your opinion on these primaries, we can agree that they've been long anticipated and harbor some of the most interesting races that we've had this cycle, particularly on the Democratic side, looking at congressional primaries. Tonight, we'll be covering four races in Massachusetts. We're going to be analyzing results by town, county, and overall result, and bringing you the projections, analysis, and updates that you like and get from Elections Daily every Tuesday when we cover elections. We're going to be covering the Senate primary, which is the most highly watched and most anticipated race of the night between incumbent Senator Ed Markey, who, if you combine his Senate and House time, has been in Congress for 42 years, since 1977. And we're going to be looking at his challenger, Joe Kennedy III, the representative from the 4th District of the famous Massachusetts Kennedy family, who is challenging Markey in the Democratic primary. Sort of unprecedented, but it's going to be interesting to see. We've had a very, very volatile race up to this point. Polls showed it back and forth. However, after the final debate, looking at the final polling going into Election Day, it does appear that Ed Markey is a slight favorite going into this race. But it's going to be interesting to see where Kennedy performs well, how well he does in his congressional district, how well Markey does, not only in the western half of the state, but also in the eastern half of the state. On top of that, we're covering three congressional primaries. The 1st District, where Richie Neal, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, is running for re-election against Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse, progressive challenger, who initially ran into some controversy surrounding allegations of sexual misconduct, which now have been somewhat debunked, at least by an Intercept article that came out, arguing that the Amherst College Dems inadvertently or intentionally attempted to damage his chances in the election. But it's become quite an interesting election, and it's going to be interesting to see, given that this has been such a bad year for House incumbents. It's going to be interesting to see how Richie Neal does. We've already had a committee chairman lose. Elliot Engel was chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. The Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax writing policy committee in the House, is even more important. So it would be very, very big to see Richie Neal go down. It'll be interesting. And the other primaries, just to briefly touch on them, we're covering the 8th District, where Stephen Lynch, the longtime incumbent, known historically as a pro-life Democrat, is running for re-election in that Democratic primary. And then the 4th District, which has been a coin toss, a lot like Lori Tran's primary victory in the 3rd, last time when Nikki Tsongas retired, a huge field where the candidate, regardless of whoever wins tonight, will probably get in the upper teens, low 20s is their victory percentage. We're expecting a very, very competitive race here. And if you followed it on Twitter, this is probably arguably the most highly anticipated congressional primary. So thank you again for watching Elections Daily. We hope you tune in. We're going to have a very big panel tonight coming on. First, I'll throw it to Eric Cunningham, our founder and managing editor, to talk about any things that he would like to add so far about the elections we're covering tonight.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, this is the first time we've been covering a single state, but I think given the importance of the primaries going on, at least to the political left and the Democratic Party, that it's more than justified to go on about this sort of stuff. This has been one of the most drawn out Senate primaries in recent memory. I would think it's been brutal at the beginning. Joe Kennedy was in a very strong position. He was pulling double-digit leads, but Ed Markey has gradually been able to reduce that to the point where, as Harrison said before, this may very well be a race where he is favored in. But obviously, you can't count anything out. You can't count out anyone with the Kennedy name in the state. And this is kind of a referendum long-term on the Kennedy name. Does it still hold that sort of water in Massachusetts? There's a chance if Joe Kennedy III wins this race and Amy Kennedy, a relative, wins in New Jersey, that you'd have two Kennedys in Congress. But it's also equally possible there could be none, which, regardless of your opinion on the family, would definitely be a substantial event in American politics, I would think. But overall, there's other primaries we're covering as well. There are 9 congressional districts tonight. Some of them have primaries, some of them aren't. We'll be giving you updates on them as well. But as Harrison said, the Senate race will be getting the most coverage here because it's been by far, I think, one of the most watched races this cycle, especially among the election Twitter community.
So tonight we don't have Joe on yet, who is our deputy head of the elections department, but he's going to be coming on sooner rather than later, hopefully. So we're going to have some more panelists that I'm going to introduce now. We're going to hear their words on the Senate race. We have Jared Stone, who studies at Princeton and works on the Map Room. He appeared on the report yesterday and talked about the influence of the current urban violence on Joe Biden's presidential campaign. We have James Newton, who's a mapper and political contributor to Elections Daily. He appeared on the report a few weeks ago talking about our House ratings. We have Dylan Wade, who has his own podcast, Popcorn Politics. He appears on Elections Weekly as a normal guest. And then we have Nick Morris, who focuses a lot on redistricting and is also a very influential person in Elections Daily, a good, solid contributor. We're
And on
happy
the
to have
map room,
him
of
here as
course.
well.
We have the
Yeah.
full map room. The map team is all here.
Yes. So, first off, if you guys could just introduce yourselves to the viewers, because all four of you have never appeared on our election coverage before. So we're happy to have you here. If you can just give a little short introduction to the viewers, just to get them to know you, and then I'll throw around some questions pertaining to the elections tonight and what you think as we wait for initial results. So we'll just go, we'll go right across the screen. We'll go right and down. So we'll go with Jared, then Nick, then Dylan, then James. So Jared, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. Once again, my name is Jared Stone. I have been with Elections Daily for a little over half a year now. I contribute. I've written some articles on various interesting political topics. And as just briefly mentioned, I'm also a contributor, a panelist on the Map Room, which is a show that I contribute for, along with our host, Eric Cunningham, as well as Nick Morris, where we talk about trends throughout different states politically.
Thank you, Jared. We appreciate that. Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, I'm Nick. I'm an Elections Daily contributor as well. Like Jared and Eric, I'm also a contributor to the Map Room. I've been writing for Elections Daily on and off for the last since its creation. As Harrison said, I mostly focus on redistricting. I've got a lot of work there on Twitter. Tonight I'm a semi-expert on Massachusetts, so this is why I'm on tonight. Been doing a lot of reading on the 4th district primary, so I'm happy to contribute to any results happening there, and I'm happy to be on.
Thank you, Dylan. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I'm Dylan Wade. I am not on the Map Room, so a little bit of a change. As Harrison said, I have my own podcast, Popcorn Politics, where I talk a lot about the civil war isn't the right term for it, but civil war within the Democratic Party right now, the lefty insurgents, and I also do movie reviews. Been on and off with Elections Daily really since the beginning as well, but happy to be here. I'm really happy this one's over.
Good. Yeah, we're happy
we've
to
been
have
talking
you
about
here.
this race a lot.
And we do have some results updates to get to you, and we're going to start our analysis then. But first, we have to have James introduce himself as well. He's also one of our best contributors. So, James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Harrison. I'm James Newton. I've been a Elections Daily contributor for about half a year, and I'm a regular mapper on election Twitter. I've contributed a lot of maps to the Map Room, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, James. We're glad you're here. And also, I know the viewers know Joe. He's here right now. But now that we've all introduced ourselves, we have some quick results updates that I want to bring to you guys, the viewers. In the 1st district, and this applies to the 1st district Democratic primary and the Senate race, but we have results in from Windsor, which is in the Berkshires. It's out west in Massachusetts, which in his 2013 primary against Stephen Lynch, that was strong territory for Ed Markey. It's a place where he did very well, and he beat Lynch in that primary 59-41. So we're expecting him to do well out there again tonight. And if Kennedy is doing well out there, that's not good. So far, Windsor is in and Markey is up. Windsor is also voting for Richard Neal, 58-42 over Alex Morse. So Neal and Markey with early leads. Actually, it appears, according to AP, that Kennedy now has a 10-vote lead. Lawrence. I'm just going to say in advance to our Massachusetts fans, if I mispronounce any of these, you know what I mean. I'm not doing it intentionally. But in Lawrence, which is up the northern half of the state in the Northeast, Kennedy is winning there right now. So the Senate race is currently 51 to 49 Kennedy. Kennedy's leading by 10 votes. No results yet out of Massachusetts 4 or 8. But we do have results out of Massachusetts 1, and Richard Neal has about a 13-point lead right now. So still, we have to wait on more votes. But again, we'd expect Markey to perform well in the western half of the state. So it's going to be interesting.
As you say
especially in
that,
Springfield.
AP has dropped the first two precincts in Springfield, and Eric, as you say that Markey should be doing well there, Joseph Kennedy currently has a lead in the precincts that have dropped in Springfield. Again, it is only 2 precincts, but it is right now in Springfield a 55 to 45% lead, according to the AP and New York Times, for Joseph Kennedy in Springfield right now. They just dropped that.
No, I misspoke. I meant Neal. I was referring to the other race, but yeah, my bad there. Yeah, but
either way, Springfield, Josh Harrison was just finishing up. That gives, according to AP and NYT, a 54-46 on the nose lead for Kennedy right now. Obviously, though, really early. And you mentioned Neal. The results there are really good for him. He has an over 400 vote lead in the first 2 precincts that have dropped from Springfield.
yeah, he is from Springfield, so
that is
he was
puts
city
a
councilman.
56-34 lead over Alex Morse at this time.
Yeah, the Berkshires are a really interesting place overall, and Springfield and actually in that first district primary, Springfield and Holyoke, which is where Alex Morse is the mayor, they're right next to each other. They're right by each other. So both candidates have a relatively close geographic base, but in terms of the regions you would expect Morse to do very, very well in are a little bit different than where you would expect Neal to do well in, because Neal is from Springfield. He's very well known there. So that should be one of his bases of support. And it's one of the larger cities in the state overall.
Yeah, we're going to throw it to our panel real quick to get some analysis. So you guys can talk amongst yourselves and shoot off of each other. But so far, what do you guys think so far of these early Senate results?
So I see more Senate numbers than that on Decision Desk.
It's not from the same place, though. It's really weird. They're all from different places.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I saw more numbers being reported. But I mean, these aren't terrible numbers for Markey, but I would, so far at least, rather be Kennedy. Again, too early though.
Yeah,
the AP doesn't have the Springfield results in yet for the 4th district, or the 1st district, sorry. They do have it in for the Senate district, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a competitive race. I think any way you look at it, I think that this is just an early sign, a predicament that it's going to be a competitive race, no matter how you slice it. So I think we're in for a really interesting night of results.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be close. At least in the Senate race, and I think in the 4th district primary too. I think no matter what happens tonight, I think both of those races, we're going to be on for a long time tonight when it comes to those races. Obviously, we're also watching the 1st and the 8th right now. Those 1st district results look really good for Richard Neal. Of course, that could change rather rapidly. Obviously, we are reminded of Lacey Clay in Missouri's 1st. Early results are very, very good for him there, and then it dipped off, and he lost in a rather close final result to Cori Bush. So certainly things can change. Things have changed before. So
yeah, did we mention that the first? If you look at the New York Times, the first precinct from Falmouth is in. This is in I think towards Nantucket or towards the coastal region.
yes,
AP reports it as well.
Yeah. So we're good on that front. Oh, and we just got another one in. We just got a Holyoke. The first precincts out of Holyoke are in. And Markey is up 53 to 47 there. And in the House race, let's see what the House race looks like in Holyoke. Ooh, it's close right now. Neal has a lead in Holyoke, which would be pretty bad given Morse is the mayor of that town.
That would be very bad.
Yeah.
Because he has to run up the votes there.
Yeah. They have 14% of precincts are in from Holyoke, and he's up by Neal is up by 77 votes. That would be pretty bad for Alex Morse if he's not winning his the town he's a mayor of.
I just want to remind, I mean, this is that's not good for Morse. I mean, again, that's just the race that really picked up attention because of a lot of the primary losses. I mean, we've mentioned it on the site, we've mentioned it on past streams. This has been one of the worst years for incumbents in a non-redistricting year, basically in modern history. Quite honestly, it has been that bad for incumbents. It's only been 8 incumbents who have lost their House races, but that's still historically one of the worst. So we've seen this race get a lot. And of course, it could change. But if it gets worse for Neil from here, it could be it could not be it would not be end up being good news.
We have 2 quick updates in the Senate race. We have 2 more towns reporting right now. East Bridgewater is breaking to Kennedy 51-49, and Burlington, which is to the slight northwest of Boston, is breaking to Markey 59-41 right now. We might have results out of the 8th district.
Yeah.
If I may jump in for a second, it's worth noting that back in 2018, when Neil faced another primary challenge, while he easily won, he still lost a few towns in the Northeast, as you see it here.
It'll be fascinating to see. It'll be fascinating to see whether the anti-Neil towns break to Morse this time. And I mean, I guess we could expect them to, but it'll be interesting to watch as these towns come in. And James had a really good map here, and I think it's going to be interesting to cross compare it against the results as we come in now.
Yeah. The Berkshires have a reputation as being quite liberal politically, so this would be an area you would expect the more ideologically liberal candidate to do in general. Very similar to Vermont, and in a lot of ways culturally, lots of artistry types, college kids. Basically, it's just a very if you're thinking one of the liberal regions of the United States, the Berkshires are like right up there in terms of just how politically active and motivated they are.
Yeah. And the drop of the first 8th district results, very good news for Stephen Lynch. He's up 75-25. I mean, again, it's East Bridgewater. It's one of the smaller counties in this district, but that's the type of numbers that he wants to see from these small districts. He's up 75-25 currently.
Yeah, in another town out west, Monroe is reporting. Markey has an early lead, and it's likely Neil also has an early lead because this was one of Neil's strongest municipalities back in 2018. He won it by over 70%.
One thing I want to touch on real quick here is because I found a good comment here in the chat, which is that Springfield is Kennedy country is what the person is saying, which I'm not sure if we'll see that tonight, but in terms of the polling, if you look at it, he's correct here is that Joe Kennedy's, if you look at the polling, he does best among white working class voters and non-college educated voters, which Springfield has a large number of. If you look at the polling, like the most recent poll, I believe it was from Emerson or something along that line, had Kennedy down, but he was up with white working class voters, which obviously are a decent number. There's a lot of communities in Massachusetts that have a sort of industrial character, not too dissimilar in terms of political, economic status from some areas you might think of in the Midwest along that lines. And so those are areas to keep an eye out for Kennedy because that is the place that are the places that he's been, if you look at the polling, he's been doing pretty well in. So if that's the case, you'd expect him to win places like Springfield.
Just a quick little thing I wanted to show, even though this is a completely different situation than Markey's first primary, since we showed James's map of the first district. This is just a map of the Lynch-Markey race back in 2013, that primary for the special election. And as you can see, there's just this wall of purple essentially from here. And even in Springfield, Markey performed very well against Lynch. But it's going to be interesting because, Kennedy and Lynch they're different animals. So like someone was saying, Springfield is Kennedy country. Kennedy definitely has a stronger appeal there, in my opinion, than someone like Stephen Lynch did. As you can see, Stephen Lynch's support was largely concentrated in the congressional district. So it's going to be interesting to see how Markey it all mirrors his last competitive Democratic primary in the Senate.
I would think another place that might be somewhere to look at for Kennedy would be somewhere like Brockton, which, as far as I know, has a large working class contingent. That's located in Plymouth County. the south, the southeastern portion of the state. There's a few other areas like that. These are places that went pretty good for Stephen Lynch. Obviously, they were in his congressional district. But if you're looking at a congressman from Massachusetts, he kind of characterizes that sort of voter a lot more than you would expect.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have some new drops from the Massachusetts Senate race. They are both down south, a little bit closer to the coast. Rochester reports in 51 to 49 for Kennedy. That's the only precinct there. But in Fall River, which has 29 precincts, the first precinct reports there right now, and it is a 73 to 27 margin in that first precinct for Kennedy. So that's a margin that he's going to want to report, kind of everywhere on the South Coast. If he's reporting that number everywhere on the South Coast, that is arguably good news for him.
Yep.
If you don't mind me chiming in, I think a good testament to the white working class nature of sort of that region of Massachusetts, especially the Southwest and even the Southeast, is the fact that a very progressive type like Elizabeth Warren back in 2018 very much underperformed in those areas. And Jeff Deal, her challenger in the Senate race, in fact, performed considerably better than Trump, even as conditions were not favorable to the GOP on a national level.
Yeah, there are pockets of Republican strength throughout Massachusetts, and a lot of them are concentrated in those sorts of areas, or at least are trending so at this point under Trump.
We have a quick update in the fourth district right now. Jake Auchincloss is leading right now, and that's that Fall River precinct that just came in, but it's the first results. And Auchincloss is about 30% right now. Grossman's in second with 22%. And then the candidates basically trickle down from there. But again, this is expected to be a very close primary where the winner ultimately gets a very small percentage of the vote.
It's really interesting because Jesse Mermel, who's been kind of considered one of the two favorites along with Auchincloss, is currently in fifth right now in these first couple precincts here at only about 8% of the vote. And so that's something to watch right now. If we see Mermel kind of underperform tonight, that would probably be very good news for Grossman. Certainly for sure. So,
yeah, of course, it's still early, so we have a lot of the night still out in what's expected to be a very close congressional primary. I know a lot of people on Twitter have related it to the primary to replace Nikki Tsongas in 2018, which Lori Trahan ultimately won. That was a very close primary, and Trahan only won the primary with about 20% of the vote, if I recall.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want to do it to compare it to a this year situation, certainly. Tennessee's first district is for the GOP this past year was very interesting. So Eric, I know he has something that he needs to make. So go ahead.
Yeah. So Stephanie Saul of the New York Times is reporting, and this gives you an idea of how Democratic Massachusetts is, but also how high turnout this primary is. More than 768,000 Democratic ballots and 88,000 Republican ballots had already been cast in mail voting and in-person early voting in Massachusetts. That's pretty good turnout for a primary, but you'd expect that given a competitive Senate race here. But that's just the in-person early voting and mail. There are additional in-person votes that are also going to come in here as well.
Quick little update, guys, in the Senate race. We have Newton coming in. So far, Kennedy has 65% of the vote there. And then north of Boston, Revere, Kennedy has a 53-47 lead there. So those are two new results coming in the Senate race. And it evens out to an incredibly narrow race right now, 50.4 to 49.6 Kennedy. Just a handful of votes right now. And
Alex Morse has also won his first county/town, it looks like. He has won Worthington, according to NYT, 261 to 177. I believe that is one. I don't know if that's one of those.
That's interesting because that one narrowly voted for Neal in 2018, if I'm referencing James's map. So that's flip.
That's a pretty big shift, yeah.
So, Alex Morse wins Worthington, according to
and for the uninitiated on New England politics, unlike a lot of other states, they don't really care about counties at all. The major focus of local and state politics are towns. Obviously, there's precincts divided up. So when we talk about things, we might mention a county, but almost all the time we're going to be talking about towns here because really that's what matters in New England. And it's pretty easy to differentiate between these sorts of areas, especially in Massachusetts. If you've heard of a New England town meeting, that kind of revolves around these sorts of locations.
And that adds into a lot of the Northeast in general. Even New Jersey is very much set up in that way, even though it's not in New England. And it partially just has to do with the fact that, unlike states like North Carolina and Missouri, there just aren't 100 counties in the state. So, but a quick point I wanted to make before we go back. If we're looking at the map that James did, I think we can expect that Neil's challenger last time got about 30% of the vote. So I mean, if we're looking at Worthington, it was a narrow Neil town. Now it's gone to Morse. So even if Morse loses tonight, I think all of us would agree that his map is probably going to end up looking like a slightly better version of Amatul Wadud's margin in 2018 there, and that was the challenger to Neil. He won about 10 towns.
Yeah, we have a drop from Worcester finally in the Senate race as an update. First two precincts have dropped from Worcester, and Kennedy currently has a 52-48 lead right now there, which pushes his lead to basically 52-48 in the entire race so far. So the first Worcester drop is in on NYT.
I think what we can expect, given the race so far, if it holds, this could be closer than people expected. If it holds being this close, but obviously there are a lot of votes that are still out, so it's not early. We still have too much time before we can make a call. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a long night of counting, folks. We're going to be here with you.
Mm-hmm. If these votes are any indication, this is there's going to be a lot here.
Yeah, it's going to be up to how these one precinct towns, these towns report, when they report, how they report it, if they're reporting this right now. If they report well, then maybe it won't be too long of a night, but if they take a little while to count, then it will be a long night. That's just the thing of Massachusetts. And when we've got a competitive primary like that, it's how it goes. So
I have some Massachusetts related comments. Is it all right if I bring that up?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think only one preseason. I know quite a lot has come in. We got some reports out Fall River, as we mentioned earlier. They show Auckland Class in the lead there. Now this is pretty interesting because Fall River has been on the news quite a lot in the last 24 hours. They had reports of high turnout in the area. I think this is near one of the other areas in the state. I can't remember which the names or anything, but yeah, Auckland Class leading there is pretty significant because I noticed when I was looking at it yesterday that all 7 candidates in this race are all from the same area. Like the district stretches from the Boston suburbs over to those working class areas near Providence. I believe they're very different, but those two towns near Boston, which are Newton and Brookline, they make up about 20% of the district, and every single candidate is from one of those two towns. So it's really up to who gets that other 80%. And I've been following the Twitter accounts of most of the candidates. They've and I've noticed that Auckland Class has been heading to some of those towns down in the southeast corner of the state, and as you can see, there's a pretty significant lead. Auckland Class with 29.7% and Marmel with 7.5%. She's really got to run up her numbers in that part of the state, in that part of the district, if she wants to win.
Do any other members of the panel have any comments they want to make on Massachusetts 4?
This is one of those interesting primaries. I mean, you have 4 people there, or you have more than 4 people there. You have a ton of candidates. With these sorts of races, you can easily see people win with under 30%, even 25% of the vote, which kind of makes these things fun to follow.
Yeah, it's basically a toss-up, and I know that that's a cliche thing to say, but really, when you've got the vote split up into that many little pieces, I mean, you don't really know who's going to win or by how much.
A comment that I'll make on the race, just out of pure observation, is the fact that Marmel is an interesting candidate. Marmel is seen widely as the more progressive candidate in the race. However, the candidate's views are somewhat interesting. It's sort of in line with Richie Torres down in the Bronx area in New York. you're sort of seeing the formation of actually a pretty pro-Israel constituency or bloc of progressive Democrats who are likely to be entering Congress. And so if Mermel is able to secure victory there, Mermel is going to be just one of those very interesting members of Congress who has that sort of viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see if Mermel does climb back up as more results come in, considering Auchincloss and Mermel are basically considered the two. I don't know if you can really use the term front runner for such a quintessentially toss-up race like this, but definitely the two front runners if you look at the Twitter perspective of the race. And I think I know I've mentioned this before, but if you guys remember the Massachusetts 3 primary, very, very similar, a very divided field, but a very competitive field within that. And Laurie Tran only won the primary with 21.6% of the vote and finished ahead of Daniel Coe, who was in second by 0.1% of the vote. So that's only 126 votes. So just like Eric said, not only is it a possibility that this is under 30%, I'd say it's pretty unlikely that a candidate does win with over 30% at the end here.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do actually think that the Richie Torres race is a good comparison for Massachusetts 4th in general. Auchincloss is a bit like I can't remember the lead candidate's name from New York 15, the one who
Ruben Diaz.
Yes. No, not Ruben Diaz. Sorry. Wait, no, I'm thinking of two different races. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Which race are you thinking of?
Primaries. New York 17.
The Mondaire Jones win?
The Mondaire Jones win, where you had the really moderate Democrat who I believe was a former Republican who was self-financing himself in an open field. I believe. I could be mixing up the two open seats that were right next to each other.
But that is still a good point. I mean, if you look at the end there, Mondaire Jones only won with 41.9%. So he ended up breaking out. So I don't really expect it to be that big of a win for whoever our winner is tonight. But I think to answer your question, the other main candidates were David Buchwald, Carlucci, Farkas, and Schleifer.
I believe
it was Carlucci.
Schleifer.
Mm-hmm.
It was Carlucci, yeah. No, I think the difference between this one, between Massachusetts 4th and New York 17, is you have two progressives in this race, splitting that lefty vote of Leckie and Mermel, and arguably Grossman.
Yeah,
I mean, mentioned some of the early results. I'm sorry.
fascinating. Sorry.
Have we mentioned some of the early results in the we started to get some stuff out of the 8th congressional district primary. Have we mentioned that so far?
I believe we did, about how Lynch has the early lead currently.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we have it. Lynch is currently up.
Only one
I know
town. Only one town is
East
reported so
Bridgewater
far.
is in
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
far, 25% of it, and Lynch is up 75-25.
Yeah, we're
So-
starting to get some scattering of stuff around Boston. None from the city of Boston yet, but we're starting to get some towns from around it. Places like Revere, Newton, Burlington, and on the south side,
And
like Randolph and places like that.
it's still good for Markey to have a big lead in Newton right now, even if the race is going to be close. Yes, Jim, what do you want to say?
Oh, I didn't have anything I wanted to say.
No, James wanted to make a comment.
Oh, sorry.
For the record, both Kennedy and Markey are from outside Boston in the east, so that could be the region that's decisive.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I would agree with that.
Kind of in a little bit of a lull right now. Oh, we got something from the 4th. Auchincloss Easton dropped. Auchincloss still in the lead. It dropped a little bit as Isane Leckie jumps up a little bit, but Auchincloss still is at 28%. Grossman at 21%, Lecky at 14, Linos at 13, and Mermel still only at 10. So it's 10% of the vote. Those are all percentages of the vote there. So that's
Yeah, I
really
do
that's
have
really
to say-
Mermel kind of down that low right now.
I do have to say, if this holds, that's not good for Mermel, essentially. I mean,
No.
Mermel in 5th place, that's not at all what Mermel would have wanted.
Bit
It is good for
surprising.
Auchincloss, though, so far.
Yeah, a bit of a surprising underperformance considering all the momentum seemed to be on Mermel's side.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the bigger shocks that we've seen so far tonight.
And again, it still is pretty early. I mean, you're only talking about 2 precincts reporting, so whether or not the rest of the district votes like these 2 precincts, we wouldn't know yet. But if it does, then Mermel's not good situation.
Yeah. I'm just so far based off the early stuff. It's almost what?
If we want to talk for Mermel, guess who's in the lead now? Brookline dropped its first precinct, and she has a huge lead there. It gave her 268 votes and just vaulted her into the top spot now at 22%. Auchincloss is still close behind at 21%. Grossman has fallen down to 3rd at 16%. Lucky is at 14%. Linos is also at 13.5%. So we have 5 candidates in the double digits right now.
That's why you can't call an election with 2 precincts.
And then there's another
think,
bordering 7%. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is the close race that we expected tonight, folks. Here it is. Here's what you expected. So here we go.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say about Brookline, it's also voting heavily for Ed Markey at the moment. He's got around 2/3 of the vote in Brookline. This is right next to Boston. I mean, it's literally right next door to it as far as things go. It's surrounded on north and south by Boston. There's a north portion of Boston that goes above it. So maybe we'll be getting some more results from Boston in shortly, because I'm seeing a lot of small towns around there starting to get their totals in or get precincts in so far.
Yeah. I mean, once we start to see Boston numbers, then we'll really kind of start to know where tonight's going. If Boston is close, then we're probably looking for a Kennedy win. If it's not close, then Kennedy's gonna have to hope for more good numbers out of places like Springfield, Lowell, Worcester, and his current congressional district down south.
Yeah, probably Brockton as well. I would like. Basically, I mean, he's doing well in Springfield and he's doing well in Worcester, even though he famously misspelled the name of the town in a campaign flyer. He's actually doing pretty well there. If you're going to lose in Boston, you've got to make up that margin in places like these other larger cities in the state. So it would seem to me like that's a pretty decent start if he's going to start winning some of these larger towns or cities.
Yeah, I mean, kind of how all these Senate races go. That's how they always kind of feel like they go. Mm-hmm. And Lowell just dropped, and Ed Markey has the lead in Lowell right now.
That's big, yeah.
The race is basically...
These are all big. Newton, Brookline, and Lowell are all good for Markey.
Yeah. Lowell is the 5th largest town or city in the state. So, I mean, that is a pretty big deal that he's leading there.
Mm-hmm. It should be enough to overcome Springfield, especially if it performs well in Boston proper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, we're talking about, like, basically towns like Boston, just nearly 700,000 people. It really dwarfs everything else. And then places like Worcester and Springfield are all in 200,000 or 150,000 people. So, we're talking about large towns. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Not remotely in the same league as Boston, but still fairly substantial in terms of the population.
Yep.
And just another Massachusetts comment about Brookline. Yeah, that's giving Mermel a huge lead, and I believe she's from there, along with 5 of the other candidates. So I'd expect her to do well in that sort of area. If this, this is looking like a huge lead. If she can hold that up in Newton, I know Newton has come in for the Senate race. So I'd expect to see something from Newton out in the House race in Massachusetts 4. That's where Auchincloss is from. I believe Becky Grossman is from there as well. So I think they would do well there. But yeah, that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the Boston suburbs, that part of the district.
Yeah, and just a quick update on Springfield. Neil's continuing to dominate there. He's just shy of 70%. of the popular vote right there in Springfield so far. So
Mhm.
that obviously is where he's from, and it made up the bulk of his coalition in 2018 when he won that primary by a large margin. So
And only 3% are in so far. Springfield and Holyoke are well below everything else, whereas Windsor, Monroe, and Worthington are all in.
mhm.
And remember those last two that Eric named, those are all reporting as towns. Like those are all they're basically just towns reporting. It's 1-for-1 precincts. Places like Holyoke, Springfield. Those are the actual counties that you'll see because those are actually multiple precincts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you've ever
and-
fiddled around in DRA, you'll know some of these are single. These towns are single precinct.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever even messed around in DRA.
And it's going to be interesting to see whether Morse wins Holyoke because he's mayor of Holyoke. It did vote for Neal because the challenger to Neal didn't have that local connection in Holyoke there. But how much is it really going to be worth in this election? I mean, I know only 2 precincts are in, but if Morse can't win his own hometown, that's not good news for him in the whole primary.
I mean, to be fair, Neal's primary challenger in 2018 was also from Springfield, and that didn't
Mhm.
make a difference. So
Yeah.
I would be surprised if Morse didn't manage to win Holyoke.
Yeah.
It's still early. I mean, it's only a
Yeah.
narrow Neal lead with 2 precincts in, so I think it's definitely still possible that he wins his hometown.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
Again, Go ahead.
I think Worthington, the one town that Morse is winning, I think that was one of the towns that Richie Neal did badly in 2018
It
as
did.
well.
Yeah,
I
it's a
believe
flip.
Brookfield just reported in Massachusetts First District. Brookfield just reported it is a nearly 100-vote lead for Neal. After Brookfield reported, he leads with all the vote in, of course. It's one of those 1 precinct towns. He leads 294 to 197, so a 97-vote lead in that town. After that all drops in, that increases lead to a 58-42 margin over Morse. So those are the numbers that Neal certainly likes to see in places like Brookfield. Well, in the Senate race, Kennedy only leads by 3 votes in Brookfield. So we are seeing, kind of what we talked about. Now, would we see Neal Markey voters? Brookfield seems like a pretty good example of that right now. If you look at those numbers,
Who did vote for last time in the last primary?
Brookfield?
Yeah,
And where is that geographically?
it's in Worcester County.
yeah, it's right outside of Worcester.
hmm It probably shouldn't be in the district, but given the way it's drawn, it is in there. So let's see if I can find that map. That
I'm
No,
looking
I have it up. It did not vote. It voted for Neal. Pretty sure.
by how much?
Yeah, it voted for Neal by 30 points.
wow. So this time it's around. Yeah, let me calculate here real quick.
Yeah,
I can
and I
do the
mean, it
math
would
in my
make
head,
sense for the Neal towns that he wins this time to be won by smaller margins, given the fact that Morse is overperforming his last primary challenger by 13 points. So
He's
we
winning
can
there
probably expect Morse's coalition to basically be a beefed up example of the towns that were won by Neal's primary challenger last
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Looks like
Worthington's
he's
a good
winning by 20
example of that
points.
because Worthington's already flipped. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's about right. So he's leading by about 12 points more, or he's performing about 12 points better than Neal's last challenger. He has 43% of the vote. So it would make sense that if you assume uniform swing, he does about 10% better, which will account for
And Markey
like Worthington or other flips in the district.
has taken the lead in the Senate
Oh,
race
wow.
with the latest update.
Yeah, seems like it's been a couple more of
Sunderland
those towns in
dropped in and was a
Mhm.
pretty big lead for him. So
Deerfield.
Yeah, Deerfield dropped in too, and Sunderland. They both dropped, and they were both very high for Markey. He got 59% in Deerfield and 69% in Sunderland. So
And these are getting in the western portion of the state, so towards Richie Neal's district. Well, in this case, it's not in Neal's district.
No, it isn't, but it's
Yeah.
still significant for Markey because these are still areas Markey won by blowout margins last time against Lynch.
Was anyone expecting Seth Moulton to have any competition this time?
I don't believe
No, I
so.
believe
I know he
Adam
has
Bass
challenges,
already
but I don't think
projected a
anyone
winner.
expected him.
He's only
two of his
it's not-
challenges dropped out.
Yeah, it's
Two of his
only at
challenges
50.
dropped
He's
out.
only at 57% right now. Obviously, that's not a competitive race, but you'd expect an incumbent congressman to be polling a lot better than 57% in a primary.
Yeah, but given this year and how harsh it's been on incumbents, I'm honestly not that surprised that incumbents are
Mhm.
far underperforming their typical primary performance standards.
Yeah, his closest competition's at 29%. So again, not competitive, but that's also not ideal for a sitting congressman to be at that point.
Yeah,
No, I know.
I mean that wasn't even on our radar, so
Yeah.
I would imagine that's one that leftist groups are going to be taking a look at for 2020.
Yeah. Didn't he run for president briefly?
He did, yes.
for like 2 weeks.
Yes, and that I've
Yep.
heard that usually makes the candidate more unpopular back home. So, yeah.
I mean, that's true. A good example of it is Michelle Bachmann when she ran for president in 2012 from Minnesota's 6th district. Normally a very Republican district, but while she was gone campaigning for president, there was a mill fire, and it cost about 2,500 jobs in the district. And her opponent was named Jim Graves, and he only lost by 0.4% in a district that voted for Romney by 18 points. So
Yeah.
that can just show you. I mean, that district was less red than this district. Moulton's district is blue. But just to wrap up my point, it just shows you that, yes, running for president does certainly reduce your popularity at home, especially if you don't address crises going on in your district.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just had a big dropout of Holyoke.
Yeah, that's continuing to bump up. Did Neil? Oh wow, Neil still leads in Holyoke.
Yeah, he leads by
Yeah.
200 votes in Holyoke now at this point, which is, again, that's not great. This is with 21% of the precincts reporting.
Yep.
I might
Again,
have to
given Morse is the mayor of Holyoke, you would expect him to be doing a little bit better in his hometown.
I may have to revise my prediction that of course he'll win his hometown.
Yeah. I know Jonathan just pointed it out in the chat. Jake Auchincloth has reached the lead. Foxborough, which is well known for being the home of the New England Patriots, has dropped, and he leads there with 183 votes going to him right now. Mermel only has 86 there, with 20% of the precincts reporting in Foxborough. So Auchincloth is back in the lead.
Yeah, I want to. Can I make a comment on Massachusetts 6? Because I actually spent the summer there last year, and that was when he was running for president, Seth Moulton, and I noticed at the time there was quite a lot of energy for a primary challenger at the time, and yeah, I think it's partly because of what you talked about like how running for president makes you seem popular. And there was a lot of that rhetoric coming from his primary challengers. They were saying that he wasn't focusing on the district, he wasn't focusing on the problems that were going on in there. I think that has died down since he dropped out. I think one of his main primary challengers, I think she was called Lisa Peterson, she dropped out because she noticed that there was like less energy. But I think some of that energy might still be there, and that's why Moulton is performing wasn't expected.
Yeah. And just a little bit more on Holyoke. If you want to go off of a percentage total instead of a vote total, Richard Neal is winning at 56-44. I don't know if that's comparable to what he did last time, but obviously, again, Alex Morse is the mayor of Holyoke. You would expect to poll a bit better than 44%, especially in a place like Massachusetts. I mean, you talk about the candidate from Brookline leading in Brookline. That would be more what you would expect in this sort of situation. But they are close. It is close to Springfield. It's only a few towns over. So that could be a factor here as well.
He did win it by 40 points last time. Then again, was not opposed by someone who had connection.
Mm-hmm. And geographically, again, they're quite close. So they're both in the same county, if I recall right, which doesn't matter much, but it does matter for organizational purposes.
Yeah, I mean, even if he does, losing Holyoke would be a very bad sign for Morse. He's going to, I think we can all accept at this point, overperform Neal's last challenger and will win more towns and municipalities than him. But if he loses Holyoke, that's not a good sign.
Mm-hmm. We're starting to get some more. I think Mount Washington
Yep.
just got in. So we're starting to get some more. Although I don't believe Mount Washington is in. Is it?
It's in
No,
on the
it's-
Senate level.
Yeah, but it's not in on the House level. This is another small town. That's one precinct town. So
Yep.
it's going for Markey, 68 to 32. Again, this is right on the border of, I believe it's the border with New York.
It is.
So we'll see if we can get. It's not a huge town. There's not a whole lot of votes out of it, but it should be reporting in on the House column pretty shortly. I mean, there's what are there 100 towns in this congressional district? It sure looks like it.
The first
Mount Washington should be voting for Neal, most likely.
Yeah.
It's one of the bigger districts, I think, in Massachusetts when it comes to size throughout the state. Maybe not size of population, but when it comes to size throughout the state, pretty big. It's nearly the entire western area of the state, basically. So it's it's a very encompassing district.
Yeah, I mean, just for context, Neal won Mount Washington by about 20 last time. So if we're looking at our uniform change, he could probably be up in the lead by about 10 here. So a lot less than Markey, enough to at least retain the lead in that town.
I mean, geographically, the congressional district looks to at least be larger than Rhode Island, which, if you want to take that for what it is, but it's a fairly large, especially by Massachusetts standards.
It probably is in terms of geographic area.
Like I'll pull up just so people know what we're talking about with these congressional districts. I'll pull up a map of the congressional districts to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Since we haven't really shown that so far. So yeah, like you can see right here. Sorry, I'm trying to pull this up. Here we go. Yeah, so you can see this is the first district right here. I mean, mainly Holyoke, Westfield, Springfield. Those are going to Pittsfield. Those are going to be ones we're looking at. You can see these first two are fairly large, and then the rest of them get a lot smaller. That kind of gives you an idea of just the urbanization in the more western portion or eastern portion of the state. Whereas these Berkshire-based areas are just not as large.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's again. I mean, what we're seeing right now in the Massachusetts Senate race, it is currently 51 to 49 for Ed Markey. This is a close race. I mean, in the last week, people maybe thought that Markey was pulling away from it. Obviously, no vote from Boston, and it's kind of small in the area surrounding Boston right now, which has looked good for Markey so far. But I mean, this is the close race that we had expected, really, in the past month. And as I say that, Kennedy is just retaking the lead. It's 50-50, but he now leads by 60 votes again with some new drops. But it's an incredibly tight Senate race. It's by far, I think, the most interesting Senate primary we've had all year for sure, considering how limited we've been in Senate primaries. It's really interesting to see this right now. And with the rhetoric that Markey was pulling away, we're still seeing a really close race right now. And it's just going to be it's going to be really interesting to see where this continues to lead right now.
Wow, it looks like we got some more out of the first district. A lot out of Springfield, it seems to be. Neal's not to 60% of the vote in Springfield. Not in Springfield. He's up to 60% overall, mainly because Springfield is now 16% reporting. He has a very commanding lead in Springfield, as expected.
Quick update, guys, on Massachusetts 4 as well. Slosh has 25% of the vote and is leading Ramel, who has 18% of the vote right now. That's a 7-point lead. That's a pretty significant lead. 5 precincts reporting, only 2% of the vote. But so far, Slosh is ahead, and Ramel and Grossman are in a pretty close battle for second place right now. But Ramel is narrowly in second place. She is doing very well in Brookline, but her totals have been gradually decreasing as other parts of the district have come in that she has proven to not be as strong in.
And as I was speaking that there was a big drop out of Springfield, we had another big drop out of Springfield. Richie Neal is now up to 61% of the vote. And in Springfield, he has a commanding 66% of the vote at the moment, with 19% of precincts in from Springfield. He's leading by over 1,000 votes at the moment, just in Springfield alone, which is basically his entire lead in the district at this point. If you take away Springfield, he's losing the race. If you take away Springfield, it looks like it's a much closer contest at the moment. He's not losing, but his lead is mainly being buoyed by a commanding performance there.
I wanted to bring up something that James said in the map. He said if Morse has any chance of winning, the path likely goes through the Northeast and holding Neal's margins down closer to Springfield. So I just thought it was pertinent to mention that, given that he's obviously not at all holding margins down in Springfield. At the moment, it looks like he's winning it by similar amount to what he won it by last time. And that's pretty bad considering on average, you've got a better performance for primary challenger Morse. James, is there anything you want to add about that with your comments and what you were meaning by them and what it means for this race?
So basically, the Springfield area is home to a ton of votes, and that was basically why Neal won by so much last time. Now, he might have also done worse in the Northeast because last decade he represented Massachusetts' second district, which looked considerably different from the current first. It was mostly in the South and started in Springfield, reached up to Northampton and stretched out east to Milford. So what I'm trying to say is that he's most likely strongest in the South, where he's a well-known figure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we have some updates, but those are some very good points, James. So I'll throw it to Joe to give us the latest updates.
Yeah, sure. So in the U.S. Senate race, it is, again, still very tight. It is 50.4% to 49.6% for Ed Markey, according to New York Times, in the 1st Congressional District. We had some more drops in small towns. Currently, though, it is still about a 1,600 vote lead for Richard Neal. He leads still 60 to 40. But towns like Worthington, Otis, and Mount Washington all came in for Morse, which we start to see him win some towns there. But still, again, it's looking good for Neal right now, but Morse is definitely starting to pull together some wins in some small towns right now there, though, too. That's the update I've got right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, just real quick, just to update about that. I mean, I'm checking right now, but Otis was actually a pretty heavy Neal town last time. We voted for him by 30%. Just to update you guys on that.
Yeah. Mount Washington voted against him 2-1 this time. Granted, that's only a grand total of 23 votes for Alex Morse this time. But that is interesting to look at. It is a Berkshire area. And it's been enough to drag Neal below 60% again at this point. But obviously the brunt of the votes right now are coming from Springfield, Holyoke, and Brookfield. I mean, and most of these towns, these small towns, are all 100% in, whereas we've not seen everything from Springfield and Holyoke yet.
And that's why it's bad news for someone like Alex Morse, because if Morse can't win his hometown of Holyoke and he's already losing to Neal, his hometown of Springfield, then essentially winning these small towns with a small population, small progressive bastions, those don't really matter very much in the grand scheme of things. And it's increasingly harder for Morse to win this primary at this point, even though he's flipped some of these small towns like Otis and Worthington.
Yep. Yeah, I'm already seeing some ill-advised people on Twitter going ahead and projecting a marquee win. We're not even close to that point at this point. Just to give you where
No,
we're sitting
not
at
at
right
all.
now, none of Boston is in. None of Brockton is in. There's a lot of larger towns and cities that aren't even close to being in, or not even in at all, or like haven't even reported anything yet.
We can't even
so
project Stephen Lynch winner because there's only one precinct reporting, essentially.
Yeah, so we're going to be here for a while. So if you want a quick result, you're not going to find it here. We're going to give you the call when the call is ready to go in. We're very confident about it, and we're not confident about any of these results right now.
A quick
Not
update
even
on
Lynch
another
or-
big city in the first that we haven't talked about yet, or another important city, and it is Pittsfield. And again, a strong Neil bastion in the last election. And the neighboring town of Hancock, which is right next to it, is currently voting for Markey by quite a significant margin, 62% of the vote. But if we compare that real quick to the margin here, let me see if it's in. Yeah, Neil's only leading narrowly right there. So the question is, will this translate into Neil only narrowly winning or possibly narrowly losing parts of Pittsfield? Because Hancock reported in and he only won it by a small margin. What do you guys think about Pittsfield? How is it going to vote this time, in your opinion?
It voted pretty heavily for for Neil in 2018, I believe. So, yeah, I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't see Morse winning it substantially. If he does win it, it's going to be a very narrow margin. But with this,
I think Neil's just going to win it by a smaller margin than he did last time.
Yeah, I mean, with Morse's underperformance relative to expectations in Holyoke, I don't know. I'm a little more pessimistic on all.
Ooh, not good news for him in Holyoke. A fourth precinct came in Holyoke, and Morse dropped from 44.2% to 43.5%. So he's gone down again.
And these Springfield drops are just brutal. We had like another 1,000 or 1,500 votes come in, and the margin has stayed exactly the same there. These are brutal. I mean, to be honest, these are very large, the largest communities in the district. You'd expect them to be doing a little bit better here and not to have to compile a coalition of a lot of small towns that frankly don't have a lot of voters. Because he's doing all right in those.
Richie Neal looks like he's going to be going back to Congress for another term as Ways and Means chair.
But again, there's things that happen early on. We had the Massachusetts, the Missouri 1 race. Early on, the city results and the county results looked pretty good for Lacey Clay, and then the late numbers that came in just absolutely just flipped it and gave Cori Bush the win. So we're not going to go ahead and call anything or say we're close to, but at the moment, the results look pretty good for Richie Neal. I mean, and as we speak, there are just more and more results coming in from Springfield because it keeps trickling in precincts, and they just keep. It's not changing at the moment.
Yeah, and the real problem is if you have Neal win the three big cities there, if you have him win essentially Holyoke, Springfield, and Pittsfield, honestly, some of the more rural small towns, which, as we mentioned earlier in the Berkshires, unlike the rest of the nation, are typically more progressive than some of these urban areas, that may not be enough. I mean, factually could not be enough for Morse unless he makes a comeback in some of these urban areas or cuts Neal's margin down.
And as we speak, we just had another town drop, actually a fairly large town, Lanesboro. And it's a town, it's gone 394 votes for Neal, 249 for Morse, and it's the third largest reporting at this point. It's the third largest community. So at the moment, like Morse is winning a scattering of small towns. He's actually winning a majority of towns that are below these top four. But when you're winning towns that are putting out 100 votes, that's really not going to help you too much when you're losing these larger areas by pretty substantial totals.
No.
Yeah, again, it's just not enough votes. We're not saying he's done yet. We're not projecting this race, but we're just saying that it's going to be difficult because again, the population just isn't as dense in some of these areas where Morse is performing better.
Any idea where Lanesboro, how Lanesboro voted last time? This is right by Pittsfield.
Yes, let me check.
Yeah, it's in Berkshire County. It's right above Pittsfield.
Voted for. Oh yeah, it did vote for Neal. It voted for Neal with 40%.
Wow. So it's a little bit lower this time.
Yeah, I mean Hancock was lower too. Neal won it by 6 this time, but 30 last time, which is why I'm wondering. Now it is important to note Pittsfield was actually stronger for Neal in 2018 than Hancock. So maybe if this holds up, he actually will end up performing better in Pittsfield than he does in the surrounding areas. But we'll have to wait and see.
So we have an update from Massachusetts 4th District, by the way. A couple of big drops, mainly from Newton and mainly from Newton County right now. 60% dropped in from there. Jake Auchincloss still has a lead. It's basically a two-horse race if you look at it right now. Auchincloss is with 26.6%. Mermel is at 26.5%. It is a 6-vote lead for Auchincloss right now. So it is very, very tight right now.
Quick
In that
update,
order.
very interesting. We've got one kind of a Joe Kennedy town out in the Berkshires, an island in the middle of nowhere. Savoy, he's winning 60 to 40 right now, and that all the precincts are in. It's a one precinct town, so not a lot of votes, but that's a town that Kennedy has managed to win, and it was a Neal town in 2018. So it's going to be interesting to see how Neal does there now. But so far, it's the only town that far west that's voted against Ed Markey in the Senate. I'm actually going to check real quick and see if congressional results are in there to see if voting for Morse. No results in there yet, but it's voting for Kennedy now, which means if it's anything like Springfield, a lot of the voters there may be inclined to vote for Kennedy and Neal at the same time, rather than Morse and Markey.
Yeah, Neal's margin just seems to be slowly climbing.
Ooh, big
It's-
Massachusetts 4 update, guys. Really close. Auchincloss is currently leading Jesse Mermel by 6 votes.
Wow.
So 26.58 to 26.52. Grossman's rounding out third place with 15%, but very, very close right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's looking
And
like
as-
Mermel's really
yeah.
It looks like Mermel's really got that Boston suburban coalition going on. Yeah, she's winning Newton, she's winning Brookline, and Auchincloss is winning everywhere else. So, yeah.
Yeah,
This
one thing I
primary is
wanted to
going to
mention.
come down to the wire. This is going to be this will be closer than the Senate race if it
Mhm.
holds. This could be this could be a primary we don't even decide tonight until we get full results in.
One thing I wanted to mention is that Dylan said that Neal's margin keeps climbing. This is because Springfield is reporting more and more. It's over 40% now, and every drop is just brutal for Morse. I believe he's still winning 66% of the vote there. So obviously, once those areas are exhausted, that will decline, and you'll see some of these small towns start to influence things. And there's a lot of them that haven't even reported yet. But again, he needs to pick up the slack there. Otherwise, he's not going to come close to winning this thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose the biggest vote sink in the district by a 2-to-1 margin,
Yeah, and then lose the second biggest one, which is Holyoke.
which is your hometown.
Yeah, yeah. Oh wow, Markey.
And so
Markey's
this
taking
is
a
pretty
huge
big
lead now.
in Boston's Senate race. Ed Markey has a 58-42 lead right now, according to New York Times.
Wow.
He's taking a gigantic lead.
Yeah,
Where's that coming
over
from?
a lot
Boston
of some
burbs.
of these Boston burbs. Newton's put in more votes that
Oh.
has him. Natick and Holliston apparently have all their precincts reporting, and he's Markey won those pretty handily. Those are some huge raw margins. That's where you're seeing the margins come in right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's bad
So
because
this
it
is
really-
not the news that Kennedy wants to see.
It is not good. It's definitely not the news Kennedy wants to see because if Markey holds, I mean, this is the same area where he performed very well against Lynch in the 2013 primary. If he continues to perform well in those Massachusetts suburbs and or in the Boston suburbs, and as Boston comes in, if he does well there, then this race could be wrapped up quicker than we thought.
Also, Joe Kennedy lives in Newton. If he's not winning this, it's bad for him. It's in his district as well.
No, yeah, he's down by
Yeah.
a significant.
It's also problematic for him.
Hmm.
Yeah, I want to see a little bit more. I want to see what comes out of Boston before we get close to stuff here. But if these suburbs are any indication, this is pretty bad. I mean,
look at Somerville. Markey votes have all been counted there, and Markey won 80 to 20.
Wow.
High student population in in Somerville.
He has almost
I think that-
70% in Brookline right now and 65% in Newton. So
We have gotten some pro Kennedy results. It's down to 58-42 now for Markey. Some of those southern Worcester suburbs came in. The county of Oxford came in good for Kennedy. He got 62% of the vote there. But and in Sutton, he got 54% of the vote. That's not what he needs, but all of Somerville just came in.
And
Okay.
and I think one thing to note that's valuable here is that
Wow.
what?
What are
That
the
Somerville
results?
result. I'm finally just. Did we report that? I mean,
we did. I
that's-
just
that's
mentioned it
students.
earlier that he won 80-20.
Yeah,
That's
I was going to
huge.
make this.
Very
Yeah,
impressive.
Wow.
And
I
he's
was gonna
winning.
men-
Also, quick, sorry, Eric, but he's winning Cambridge, which is right below Somerville. He's winning it by 81% right now.
Wow.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole area like has some of the highest student populations in the country. So that's
Yeah, it's
probably
very
where that's
very
one.
college oriented, and I think you're seeing Ed Markey was able to really dispense a huge population of student volunteers, so a very young demography of people with this campaign. So I think that really is reflected by some of these early results.
At the end of the day, small towns like Savoy and Florida out west mean nothing to Kennedy when he's being blown out in the incredibly population dense Boston suburbs and possibly Boston itself once it comes in.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something Grace Panetta said on Twitter, which I find pretty useful here, is that at this point, Kennedy to win, he really, I'm quoting her at this point, is he has to clean up in cities like Boston, because even though he's leading in polls with non-white voters, Markey represented a large portion of Boston when he was in Congress, so they're familiar with him in the area. And if we're hearing reports accurate from Stephanie Murray on Twitter from Politico, Markey may have swept South Boston, which would be pretty disastrous. That's where Kennedy launched his campaign.
That would effectively end Kennedy's hopes of winning this race tonight.
Yeah.
On top of the already fairly bad results in the suburbs for him.
Yeah, we're being cautious here. But yeah, these results at the moment are just not what Joe Kennedy wants to see. If he's losing East Boston, where he launched his campaign, that's a pretty big problem. Because he doesn't have a lot of other options at this point as to where he wants to pick up votes.
Yeah, a quick update on another race, the 8th district race. Moore has come in and Stephen Lynch has come down slightly. He was leading with 75%. Now he's at 72%. If this lead holds, we could consider calling it soon. But again, we just want to see more precincts reporting just to see if his lead goes down significantly because
Like
there are only
specifically the ones in Boston.
1,500 votes in. They're not very many.
Yeah, specifically we want to see the ones in Boston because he has a portion of Boston in his district.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah, it's
wow, we
very
just had
high
a big
population
precinct.
there.
We had a big drop. This is just even getting worse for Alex Morse. The whole town of South Hadley has reported, and Richard Neal won that town 2,619 votes to 2,021 votes. This is now makes it larger than Holyoke's report at this point. So there's other towns that have reported, but at the moment, Neal is winning the three largest that have reported so far.
And interestingly, he only won South Hadley by 20 points last time. So
Someone's asking if anyone here is from Massachusetts. I think Dylan, you're from Massachusetts, right?
No, I'm from New Jersey.
New Jersey.
yeah, none of us are from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But we do this
I
for
have
every
some-
state, so it's not all too uncommon that we're not from the state we're covering.
I have some like Massachusetts knowledge, like I particular parts. But like
Yeah, because you've been involved in campaigns there, right?
I have, yeah. Yeah, like specifically
I-
Boston and the North Shore.
I used to have family from there, so I've been there a couple times, but that's all.
Yeah, we got a pretty substantial East Coast bias on right now because Jared is, I think, the only Westerner on the show at the moment. So
If you are a West Coaster, we will take you because we might need.
Well, I'm in New Jersey right now, so I'm sort of an East Coaster by now.
So we will.
This is New Jersey supremacy. The majority of this group is from New Jersey.
It's true.
This is the only thing that New Jersey dominates in.
yeah, but I mean, Jim's originally from Maryland, right? So same general area, upper northeast.
Although, depending on who you ask, some some will say it's in the South. I can consider it the North.
I think most people would consider it the North, except for people who have a really expansive definition of what the South is.
I don't think if you've ever lived in the South, you would know Maryland's not the South.
Yeah, they have crabs.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of says it all. Like,
Yeah, crab cakes are good in Maryland. Crab
yeah,
cakes. are
once
good in
you
Maryland.
once you get to like the crab areas, that's where you start running out of where the South is.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have to kind of consider Delaware Southern if you consider Maryland Southern as well.
That's definitely not. Let me tell you, I've been to Delaware. I have family in Delaware. It's not the South. Let me tell you. It's not the South.
Delaware is just really, really South Jersey.
You know, that's not a lot of Italians live there. You know, it's not necessarily wrong.
Yeah, we're getting even more out of Springfield, and again, it's up to almost 50% reporting, and Neil is holding his 2-1 lead. I mean, there's not much more to say other than that's really bad.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
looking good for Neil, for Morse going on in the night so far, from the
Yeah.
results we have now. I'm just waiting for more of Holyoke and Springfield to dump and see how that alters the race.
Yeah, it's really hard to outspend someone like Neil, and if he's able to blanket the airwaves, I mean, this margin isn't all that surprising considering.
So
Well,
we've got
it's
5
always-
more precincts in from Cambridge, and Markey's leading by 81, or leading with 81% of the vote.
Yeah, that came. I mean, it's not like a lot of votes necessarily, but that is just such a huge like that just blows my mind about how huge that percentage is. I mean, that just shows what Markey has been able to do with the progressive, educated vote in those Boston suburbs. I mean,
Wow.
that's
Very
just kind of
impressive.
the story, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here's an MSNBC reporter put this out. Kennedy's on the ballot in Massachusetts Democratic primaries. JFK won 6 of them to no losses. Ted Kennedy won 10 of them to no losses. Joe Kennedy II won 6 of them to no losses. And Joe Kennedy III won 4 of them to no losses. This would be the first loss in a Democratic primary for Kennedy in a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to stretch all the way back, one of the original Kennedys, one of the 4 Boston power brokers, they used to call him Honey Fitz. He had some losses for Boston mayor in his feud against Jim Curley. And the John McCormack biography talks about all of that. But basically in the modern era, we really haven't had a Kennedy.
Yeah, once you start with
Who's the bomber?
JFK, when you get to him as the Kennedy establisher.
Yes, basically you're correct.
And the
And
margins
it's just
dropped.
important to note, in Springfield right now, Neil is slightly overperforming Kennedy, if that's just something we want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Which that's interesting. It's a very working class area from what I can tell. There's a lot of, and obviously Neil is from there, so that would be kind of a big thing. But they're both performing pretty well, all things considered. I think it's one of the better towns for Kennedy. If you look at it's certainly one of the better large towns.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And the totals dropped a little bit in the Senate race. It's down to 56.5% for Markey, but we're still waiting for those Boston results to come in.
yeah. If we need to see something from Boston, I'm sure once we do, and once we kind of expect to see what they are, that's when you might see us decide to make a call.
Yeah, Boston could seal the deal for Markey and for Stephen Lynch, ironically, considering they both ran against each other in the 2013 primary.
Mm-hmm.
I want to welcome someone else to our panel, Peter, real quick. He's going to be joining the panel now, so welcome. He's another person at Elections Daily, guest on the report and host of The World Tonight, so welcome.
Good night. Good evening. Welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so what do you think so far, Peter, about the results you've seen?
So I think the big one that's really caught my surprise so far is the Richard Neal Alex Morse primary. I know it's early, but the margin is a bit of a surprise. that Neil is doing well. Obviously, we have to wait and see, more numbers to come. But if that maintains itself, that's really, really a bit of an interesting storyline where this race was hyped up to be a barn burner, and it may actually have not been, and that Neil's maybe campaigning on the ground may have actually been much better than most people anticipated. And a closer, and the Senate primary is not surprising. Senate primary being a little more closer than I think expected is also a bit of a interesting sight for the night.
That's a good point. Actually, I was saying earlier that I think Neil. Well, I said earlier that I thought Neil would have a closer race than before, but still win fairly comfortably because he's not like the other incumbents we've seen go down, and he actually seems to pay attention to what's happening in his district.
Oh, I agree with Jim there fully. I think the other thing I think a lot of people forget is being the chair of the House James, apologies.
That's fine.
Is that, Richard Neal being the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee does have that influence with it. It may not be, very big to say it, but there are probably, he can say it, I've been there, I get the district the funding it needs because of being the chair. And I think for some voters that probably resonates. Why would we kick out the guy who's getting us the goods and gravy for our district? So yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's just hard to see Morris's base in some of the more rural progressive towns out here being enough to overcome his deficit in Springfield and hometown of. Even if he ends up winning Holyoke, he's still losing Springfield by a significant margin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
just for fun. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, we're starting. Just more and more of these towns are coming in Massachusetts, and again, they're not all going for Morse by large amounts, and they're not all going for Morse at all. And sometimes, so I mean, as we kind of continue to see those come in, that's really kind of the key here is that it's just not all for Morse, and that's really kind of been his key issue currently is that it has just not been all for him. He really needed all these small towns to kind of be going for him, and they're not, and that's why you're seeing him struggle tonight.
Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to mention, since we haven't really reported on it at all, is the Massachusetts Republican Senate primary. Obviously, this is kind of a, but Republicans are actually going to be happy tonight if the results hold because the Kevin O'Connor, who I'm not familiar with, is leading Shiva Ayyadurai 59-41. If you're familiar with Ayyadurai, he's claimed to have invented the email, among other conspiracy theories. He's talked about locking up Dr. Anthony Fauci, among other things, is known for conspiracy theories. Kevin O'Connor is certainly not that. So this is obviously in a state like Massachusetts, it doesn't matter too much, but this is definitely, if this holds, Republicans would get a candidate who is less bad, certainly.
I've been robbed of a really entertaining candidate once again.
And that, folks, is the prelude to we do have a major call to make in very, very short time.
Is anyone watching on this on anything other than the New York Times?
No, I'm not. I think we're all watching AP or NYT right now.
I've got Decision Desk up, but
Decision Desk and the Secretary of State's website.
I mean, I have New York Times up on one monitor, Decision Desk on another.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And for what it's worth, the one Massachusetts Republican I know did vote for O'Connor, said he's a nice guy. So they seem to be pretty happy with it, or at least the one Massachusetts Republican I know does. So.
And Elections Daily can project that Richard Neal, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, who's held his seat in Massachusetts since 1989, will defeat Alex Morse. He has strong leads in his hometown of Springfield and in Alex Morse's hometown of Holyoke, two important cities in the district, and he is likely to win Pittsfield, which he carried last time. This simply leaves Morse without a significant electoral base left that could theoretically allow him to win the primary, even though he's winning and flipping some more rural progressive Berkshire towns from Neal that Neal won last time. It isn't enough to overcome Neal's lead in the urban areas. So we can expect Richard Neal to win this primary, go back to Congress for another term. Just throw this around. What do you guys think so far?
Well, it's, I think, very interesting to see, and I don't like to do this jab, but it seems that real world and Twitter do not coexist. I mean, Twitter was telling us that, Richard Neal was in desperation. He was going to go down. This was the end. And in the end, Richard Neal looks comfortably set to go back to Congress again. And Alex Morse, it seems, never actually did resonate, it looks like, with the voters of his district. And that itself, I think, is the real big story of the night, is Neal doing much better than it's expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely Neal got a run for his money with all the notoriety that Alex Morse did build up, but evidently it did not come to fruition. And so Neal is able to retain his very important post in the House of Representatives that makes him such an important and essential member in that capacity in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say this. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I would say this is a pretty substantial defeat for the progressive wing, especially given what a priority they placed here. But we don't know what total the scandals played in on Morse. To be fair, we really don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Neal was always kind of a reach for an incumbent. He was fairly well liked in the district and had good outreach from what I know anyway. So, and the amount of money he had, the amount of advertising he could do was too dominant for most challengers. I am a little surprised by the
sorry to interrupt, but we have an important update out of Massachusetts 4. Mermel is actually in the lead now with 28.7% to Auction Slosh's 25.7%. So definitely a lead there. And so far, potentially, we're getting closer and closer to the 30% bet.
A lot
a
of
big
that
drop
from
from
Newton,
Newton.
though, and that's about a 900 vote lead there for Mermel. So it's because 69% is now reported from Newton. That's where we're seeing that right now.
And just quickly to go on Dylan's point. Oh, sorry, Nick. I'll let you go.
Me.
Oh, I thought you were at a point, but I'll quickly run
Sorry,
off.
no. I was gonna say it's all gonna come down to those southeast areas of Massachusetts 4th District. That's it. Yeah, you can go now.
Oh yeah, sorry. I think Dylan hits an important thing here. I think a lot of the incumbents we've seen go down this year, Clay, Angle, etc., all seem to have lost touch with their district. It seems in this case Richard Neal has kept his touch with his district. That his district seems to see in the fact that he does represent their interest well, as we're seeing tonight, as this margin shows that it seems a lot of the voters in this district do value the almost now 31 years of experience that he has in Congress and everything he's given the district itself.
Yeah, and I think that there is a certain degree of endearment even among those constituents who especially have known him for a very long time. I mean, they call when they're advocating for him, before this happened, they were in support of Richie Neal. I mean, this is someone that they've known for a very long time, and so I think it's hard to say that he has gotten out of touch at all with his district.
Yeah.
And we can project that Congressman Stephen Lynch, who represents Massachusetts 8th and actually ran for Senate against Markey in the 2013 special election primary, will defeat Dr. Robbie Goldstein to win re-election. So Lynch will win this Democratic primary, currently leads with 73% of the vote, doesn't seem to be in substantial danger. So both incumbents with challengers from the left have now secured their re-election in their primaries to move to the general elections in districts where they are heavily favored to win. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was some hype around Lynch. And kind of this race, as we kind of got closer, people saw that his numbers weren't that great. Fundraising wise, some people thought that maybe Goldstein had a chance, but really without that, it just did not get the notice that places like Neal, the Senate, the first, the fourth, and the Senate race got. So Lynch is going to probably really cruise here. I mean, we're not seeing any signs that Goldstein is going to be able to do anything. Lynch is going to continue this about 75% margin today, and he's going to. And maybe the storyline is that incumbents survive in Massachusetts, in which in so many other states.
Yeah, Lynch is doing very well. 73% margins holding very securely as more votes have come in.
Yeah. I think what I would say personally is I think people tend to overstate the political liberalness of Massachusetts to a degree. Yes, it is an overwhelmingly Democratic state, but the voters aren't especially, I don't think, ideological in terms of we have to have this certain sort of candidate. Obviously, you had, Ayanna Presley won her race, but this was in a majority-minority district against a very that was drawn to be that way. That's kind of a different thing than, for example, someone like Stephen Lynch, who, by all accounts, seems to represent his mostly blue-collar, constituents pretty well. Richie Neal obviously seems to be pretty well representative of Springfield and some other areas in the western portion of the state. Used to represent, portions of central Massachusetts, which have actually trended more towards the Republican Party as of late. So I would just say, at least from my perspective, it seems like, again, this is a state where most voters are not affiliated with either party. So while there may be a lot of progressive sentiment, it's not necessarily the pure reality that they want a pure ideologue representing them to all levels.
I mean, those are all. Sorry. Yep.
I think Eric hits the nail here. Massachusetts in general is a very establishment-friendly state. The Massachusetts voter doesn't really like, compared to many other states in the country, throw out their incumbents. In Presley's case, it was really a generational battle. I mean, she and the previous congressman were really ideologically similar to each other. They just, again, it was a district that had changed in terms of demographics, and that congressman lost. So yeah, I think of more of it's a state showing its establishment-meaty trends.
Quick update, real quick, out of the Senate race. Some important results we're getting out of these Boston suburbs. Boston could very well seal the deal for a Markey victory for us here at Elections Daily, but the news only continues to look good out of the suburbs for Markey. In Newton, 90% of the vote is in, and Markey still leads with 65% of the vote. That's Joe Kennedy's hometown, so that is definitely not good news for him there. In Brookline, all the precincts have been counted, and Markey has won with just about 70% of the vote there in Brookline. Cambridge, he currently leads with 81%. Still only 14% of the votes in there, but it's likely it'll mirror its result in the neighboring Somerville, which Markey won by 80%. Or with 80%.
Newton's also getting good results to Jessie Mermel as well. She's now ahead by 3.4 points. When we see Brookline coming in, which we'll probably do soon because it's coming in for the Senate race, we'll probably see good results for her as well there.
Yeah, but the important thing to remember, though, is that there are still a lot of these southern counties left. We're still gonna be here. This Massachusetts fourth race is still gonna take a while because that Newton margin is not enough for us to say that Mermel has this in the bag. If it was farther apart, then yeah, we'd say it's in the bag for Mermel. But she has only been a 950 vote lead there right now. Over Auchincloss. That's not enough for what we expect. Maybe some of Auchincloss's margins could be in some of those southern counties in this district for us to say that, Mermel's got this. That's kind of the important thing to realize right now.
Exactly, yes. And yeah, I feel pretty good about Auchincloss right now because a 3.4 lead isn't really that much. You'd expect her to be more when you have almost the whole of Newton, which is a big city in that district and that's supposed to be good for her. But yeah, I feel good about Auchincloss because it looks like those towns in the southeast are doing well for him.
Just to go back to Lynch for a second. So he's been a perennial target of progressives, among other things, because he's voted against the Affordable Care Act. But since then, it seems like he's kept in touch with his district strongly, just like Richard Neal, and I think that's what sealed the deal for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a lot in a way, kind of like Dan Lipinski. I mean, he has a historic record of actually being pro-life. He did, as you said, vote against the Affordable Care Act. Definitely, he's not, I wouldn't say a moderate Democrat, but definitely a Democrat that would draw the ire of some progressives in recent years. And he's successfully, unlike Lipinski, managed to dispatch his challenge this time. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if Lipinski can keep, if Lynch can keep this up, or if Lynch will retire in 2022, or if he'll actually lose a primary. I think Dylan had to leave earlier, so we couldn't mention that, but I wanted to mention that as well. So thank you to him. And Jared also appears to have to go. So thank you so much, Jared, for coming on tonight. We just want to thank you for being part of the.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep. So we're just waiting out here for Boston proper to come in. See if it mirrors the results in the Boston suburbs or possibly exacerbates them.
Yeah, it's been so far. I think tonight we could say so far the night of no surprises, which is genuinely something this year hasn't given us in a lot of these primaries. That seems a little odd to say.
I know some people had
I do
MA8
think
on their back burner.
Massachusetts 4 is probably going to end up being the marquee race tonight.
Yeah.
The marquee race will not be Marquis's victory. So, I don't know if we mentioned this as well, but Lowell is actually closer than we had earlier expected. It's 54-46 marquee.
So Brookline is now all in. That was huge for Mermel. She got 755 votes there to compare to Auchincloss's 2,039. She now leads 32.3% to 21.4%. So that's huge there for Mermel.
Yeah, and that was huge, as we mentioned about 10 minutes ago. It was also huge for Markey as well, who won it with 70% of the vote over Kennedy.
I still wouldn't call it just yet, just because that's Mermel's base. That's where she lives. I think this is where she's mostly campaigning. So I think we should still wait for those southeastern portion of the district.
I absolutely agree, Nick, for sure.
Yeah, because the other parts of the district
because now
are not.
that's 91% in Newton, that's 100% in Brookline. There's a lot of these, they're one precinct towns, but they're small towns that there's a lot of them that we're going to need to see. And if Auchincloss is kind of keeping the margins there.
And Mermel hasn't done as well in towns like that are still out. So Mermel's got to hope that the margin the margin that's been run up in Brookline is enough to save the candidacy there, or protect the lead, I guess you could say, from the rest that's coming in. Kind of like insurance.
And ideologically, do we have any idea where these candidates stand? Like, which one would be the preferred choice of, for example, a moderate or a more progressive Democrat in the fourth?
Would be the moderate. Mermel would be the progressive.
Yeah, Mermel would be the
base.
Yeah, some Democrats attacked Auchincloss because of the vote for Charlie Baker.
Even though the vast majority of Massachusetts voted for
and 81% of Democrats approve of Charlie Baker, so that's not really an effective tax strategy. Exactly. Charlie Baker basically is very similar to a Democrat if you look at overall policy.
Yeah, you voted for an overwhelmingly popular governor. It was really not as effective as an attack ad as you would think.
Yeah, I mean I would agree with that. I mean, ironically, one of the candidates Baker did endorse tonight has won. That would be Neal. So it'll be interesting to see if he continues his streak of endorsed candidates winning tonight.
And I really think that helped Neil in that district. I mean, this is probably a hot take, but yeah, like Baker's hugely popular in the state, so that might have helped him.
Piero, could
Yeah, I know a lot of the more progressive-minded people on Twitter have wanted Ramel to defeat Oshkosh, whose name I will be able to say perfectly after the next 2 years
Yeah, I
if
learned
he's
it
in
earlier.
Congress, because I can't say his name now, but maybe 2 years from now I will be able to.
One thing I want to say is that overall, it seems like the best area for Kennedy is between Springfield and Worcester. Specifically, that's actually the area Richard Neal used to represent in Congress, that portion of the state, stretching from along those areas. It's actually more Republican than it was under the Obama administration. I have to look at the DRA map again, but there's a pretty considerable swing there, at least in terms of Democratic vote bleed. Much more of a working class area, but that's not going to be enough to save him if he doesn't do very well in Boston in particular. I just thought it was interesting because those two cities in particular he's doing fairly well in, as well as the places surrounding
Yeah,
them.
and just so the viewers know, we're really waiting for those Boston results to see whether or not they mirror the suburban results or if they're possibly even bigger in terms of a Markey domination. We're going to have to see. But that's what we're waiting for before we make a call here. But if Markey did well in South Boston, that could very well be the end of Joe Kennedy in this race.
which, if that is the case, would be a very big, storyline, considering the whole dynamics of the Joe Kennedy saga in this race, from having a double-digit lead when entering to possibly blowing it into a double-digit or whatever type of loss would be quite a significant, shift in the politics of Massachusetts.
Yes, it would. Big update real quick. Oh, sorry, I was reading the data wrong. Never mind. I was reading something from one town, not the whole district.
New York Times, we've already called this race, but the New York Times has officially called the Massachusetts first primary for Richard Neal. So now we're starting to see other sites and other places start to come in for this here. So Neal going back to Congress, as we've said.
Yeah, Richard Neal definitely argued. He ran a good campaign, and he had definitely more enthusiastic support than some of these other incumbents like Engel and Clay who have gone down. So that's definitely good for him. He's managed to survive a year that's been very, very bad for incumbent representatives.
Mm-hmm. I'll be interested to see how he. Obviously, the portion of this district that's the most liberal is the Berkshires portion. Arguably, he might not. If this were a district drawn to include more of that area, he would have maybe a little bit more of a problem. But as it stands, with such a performance in these urban areas and in these larger towns, it seemed like he spent the right amount of effort winning the votes he needed to win over.
Yeah, and places like Pittsfield, Holyoke, Springfield, that's where most of the vote is cast.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we've mentioned before, it's just that's why Moores didn't really have a winning coalition going into this night.
Yeah, and Morris was all we'll never know how much that scandal may have dragged Morris's final support down in the eyes of certain voters, maybe who said this maybe isn't the type of guy we want to send to Congress with a cloud of. And I'm not trying to get into the allegations themselves, but of judgment calls.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the internet isn't real life and the Intercept isn't real life.
Well, I don't like to say it. The Intercept is probably the classic definition of fake news. I'm sorry if I said that, but I will. I apologize.
They have some quality reporters, but whereas we tend to avoid having an ideological skew in our articles and in our content, they certainly have a firm ideological backing that underpins a lot of what they do. And that may not be completely in line with what the average voter in that district thinks.
It's kind of like Daily Kos or RRH,
mm-hmm.
except more prominent. We at Elections Daily, we just don't believe in the concept of media that has a partisan lean being real media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. we're happy to have people from all sides of the aisle contributing. We on our staff we have people from the right wing and the left wing, and as long as the content is good and you're looking at it from the right perspective, not the right perspective, but from an ideologically sound perspective, a consistent one, that's what we value.
On a different note, I think this is interesting to mention since we're talking about Massachusetts, that, regardless of tonight, if Kennedy does possibly lose, that it might be interesting to see if there's an opening with the other seats, since it has been, of course, rumored that one Elizabeth Warren has been floated for a cabinet position in a potential Biden administration. Would someone like Kennedy run again in a special like this against possibly an Ariana Presley or a Maria Haley? Anyone's thoughts on that subject?
Well, I think if he loses, it's kind of embarrassing and heavily career damaging, considering the association with Kennedy victories in Massachusetts, especially in Democratic primaries. And arguably, I think Ayanna Pressley would be able to kind of do what Ed Markey did and rally the progressive support that Markey's gotten from young voters and minorities around him to overwhelm white working class Democrats and the Kennedy coalition. So I really don't know how effective it would be. And obviously this is just a prediction, but losing one race like this, especially a Democratic primary as a Kennedy in Massachusetts, it's not very good news for future Senate ambitions. I think part of the reason why Kennedy was running this time in the first place was to avoid having to be against Ayanna Pressley in the primary.
Anyone else?
One other factor we need to consider is the legislature would need to change the law. If I recall right, they need to change the law back so the governor can't do an interim appointment. They keep changing this law depending on whether a Republican is in charge or not, as to who can make interim appointments and to what extent and how long. Obviously, they would prefer someone like Ayanna Pressley to be running there as opposed to a more moderate candidate.
And just for those who may not be aware, the law Eric has mentioned has been changed. It was first changed in 2004, when Mitt Romney, of all people, was the governor of Massachusetts, and when John Kerry was running for president against George Bush, in the scenario where Massachusetts Democrats didn't want Mitt Romney to choose John Kerry's replacement in the Senate. So this is when the rule was changed. And then, if I recall correctly, the rule was changed a second time.
When Deval Patrick was governor.
Deval Patrick was governor.
So he could appoint the replacement to Ted Kennedy after Ted Kennedy died.
That's right.
And the replacement did not run for a full term. Obviously, we know who won that race, but they would probably want to change the law again because Charlie Baker could appoint someone popular, or who knows, or he could appoint himself. That's always a possibility. He could run in the race. They'd obviously prefer to have someone in office as an incumbent who would be able to take over that position ahead of an election.
And it should be noted that the Democrats, Massachusetts, do have supermajorities in both chambers, so changing the law wouldn't be a problem. It just would be timing. Either
beyond a supermajority. Yeah, they have beyond a supermajority.
This is
he could pull a Joe Manchin and appoint someone to fill his seat on the condition that he runs in the special election.
Yeah, and I think we may have something coming up here.
Yes, a very big call.
Yeah. We'll let you sit on. We'll let you sit on that for a few minutes.
Yeah, and but really, what we're all going to be waiting on right now is the southern part of what is now Joe Kennedy's former congressional district, the 4th district. Jesse Mermel has a 32-21% lead over Jake Auchincloss there right now, but her home supports of Newton and Brookline are basically all in right now currently. A lot of those southern coastal towns where Auchincloss campaigned have not produced any results yet. So we're gonna be waiting on this one for a little while here, as we wait for some of those southern towns and counties to come in until we can really make a call here in the 4th. This is going to be the last race we're going to make a call here, though, for sure, as we get closer and closer in the night.
Indeed, and this will be a fun night, even more with the likely, call will be coming up very shortly, and that could very well have a very big impact, not just for the short term, but the very long-term impact of Massachusetts politics.
Oops. Welcome Andrew Payne to the broadcast here, right ahead of a call we're going to be making.
And Elections Daily can project the conclusion to one of the most controversial and interesting Senate primaries in modern history. Ed Markey, the incumbent Democrat, will defeat Joe Kennedy. The race was wobbly over the course of the campaign, and at some times Joe Kennedy was seen as a slim favorite over Markey, but following the third debate and Markey's resurgence in the polling, Markey was viewed as a slim favorite. He's currently dominating in the suburbs of Boston, which make up the largest portion of the electorate, and he's expected to perform well in Boston proper when it comes in. So Ed Markey will defeat Joe Kennedy. This is a major blow, Congressman Kennedy. And unless Amy Kennedy wins in New Jersey too, there will be no Kennedys in Congress. And given that Kennedy married into the family in New Jersey, there will be no blood by blood Kennedys in Congress if following this primary. So it's a major blow to the Kennedy electoral history in Massachusetts, and it's a major victory for Ed Markey, who mobilized a coalition that you wouldn't expect for someone who's of that age and has been in Congress for that long, but largely of young voters and minority voters. So that's a Markey.
Big comeback win for Markey. I don't think anyone would have expected this at the start of the campaign. Joe Kennedy expected him to sleep through a re-election bid, maybe even drop out, but it didn't happen. He fought. He fought like hell. I guess you put it bluntly, for a Senate seat, and it paid off.
Yeah, I think this is to put it. I think it's the comeback really of the year. Really, I mean, Joe Kennedy came into this primary basically expecting to tear Markey apart and have a Senate seat and probably have a seat for life as long as he felt it. But to Markey's credit, he fought, and arguably since June, the momentum swung to Markey's side, and a poorly run campaign on Kennedy's part with a gaffe about naming towns in Massachusetts that haven't existed in 90 years, and getting a real annoyed at the Boston Globe for not endorsing him really were rookie mistakes. And inevitably, Kennedy really, ironically, like his great uncle Ted, just really could not tell voters why he really wanted to be the United States Senator from Massachusetts.
And
I think it definitely has proven that Massachusetts is not open to ambition for ambition's sake in terms of running for Senate here. Markey managed to prove that he was a dedicated, lifelong legislator who fought against corruption, and I think that message managed to resonate in the final weeks of the election.
Keep in mind, Markey tried to do something similar in the 80s, and he dropped out of the Senate race at the last minute, had to really fight to hold his House seat, and he waited almost another 3 decades to run for the Senate again. I mean, he learned his lesson at that point. You don't try to do this prematurely. Like it or not, there's a way for you to do this sort of thing, and it involves you being in Congress for a substantial period of time. Unless you're someone like Elizabeth Warren, who just kind of jumps in there, become a national figure like that. But
it's not good. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably the end of the Joe Kennedy career.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'd also like to note is that I think Ed Markey was extremely effective in how he chose to attack Joe Kennedy. He presented himself as the forward-looking candidate, the candidate who was head of the times on the Green New Deal. He attacked basically Kennedy as being of the past, as being by his name, running on a legacy, not running on anything of his own merit. And when he personally attacked his name over the last few weeks, that really forced Kennedy into a position he did not want to be in, where he had to run explicitly on being a Kennedy as opposed to implicitly running on it, which there is a difference there. You can implicitly skate by on your name, but you can't just run, I'm a Kennedy, vote for me. You can't go out and patently say that. And he had to be in that position over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and it's a historic also note that this is the first Kennedy, I believe, in about 100 oddish years that has lost a race. in Massachusetts. The cycle has broken itself. And, someone in the chat really mentioned this. Joe Kennedy went from being the Democratic response to the State of the Union, it's the son of a privileged family, to now losing his Senate primary, having no House seat, and come January of 2021, will have no political job next to his title, will be out of work.
Mm-hmm.
I think you all make good points. I think the people of Massachusetts, well, at first it looked like Kennedy might win solely on his famous last name. Markey was able to make the case that he's the more forward-looking candidate, and that Kennedy was an opportunist and should have waited until an open Senate seat.
Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't. I mean, obviously, the prevailing thought is he didn't want to run against Diana Presley. Honestly, if he'd told Markey ahead of time, I'm going to run for Senate, Markey might have seriously considered dropping out, or even along that lines, because the thought of the start of this was a campaign he could not lose. Well, he found a way to lose.
I 100% think that he was planning on barnstorming the state, doing in-person events, and really out-energizing the Markey campaign that way. But when COVID happened and everything went digital, Markey had the power of memes on his side, while Kennedy was just a Kennedy.
I mean, he had the youth energy. Who would have thought that Ed Markey, of all people, who basically sleptwalked to a Senate win in 2014 in a special election.
Who would expect that a guy that voted for the Iraq War and the 94 crime bill was the left-wing option?
And
he makes a good point.
I mean, Kennedy had support from Bill Weld. He had support from Gabriel Gomez, who ran against Markey in 2014. He had support from the moderate wing.
And not to mention the questions about Markey's residence. He has a house here in Maryland and spends a lot of time here.
To be honest, us Marylanders have about 50 senators.
Yeah, it's not like that's something you can just use exclusively against Markey. I mean, there are so many members of Congress who live in Maryland. I mean, it makes
Martin
sense.
Heinrich lives in Maryland.
It makes sense when you think about it. You should have a house in Maryland. I mean, at the end of the day, these people, it's not like they don't live in their state. It's not like they didn't grow up there for the most part. It's not like they didn't start their political career there. It's not like they were just elected in their sleep. I mean, just because Markey has one house in Malden and spends more time in Maryland, because, I mean, would you rather have your senators spending all their time at home and not doing anything for you in Washington? Is that really the point of being an elected official?
Well, yes, but I think you also have to look at it. I think the problems that Sunday voters run into, and I think the perfect example is this is someone like Richard Lugar. Lugar was a widely respected senator, but inevitably people thought he doesn't live in Indiana anymore.
And it worked.
I mean, it worked.
Murdoch beat him in that primary by 21 points and then lost to Joe Donnelly. And if Lugar had won that primary, Joe Donnelly would have lost by probably 7, 8, 9, 10 points.
Well, I'd say
lost by more.
He would have lost by more.
He would have lost by probably 15.
He wouldn't have ran
10
for
to
Senate.
15.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it,
Well, he was already running before Lugar lost his primary, so
he didn't even have competition the last time he ran. I don't think he basically just faced a libertarian. I mean,
yeah, I mean, if Lugar had ran one more time without a primary challenge and then retired, yeah, he probably would have beaten Donnelly. I'm going to go out and win by 20 or 15 points.
I'd say like probably around 15.
But yeah, I think the thing is, I think a lot of voters, whether it's fair or not, do have this prevailing mindset of thinking of politicians in the wrong sense of not living in their state. Obviously, didn't come back to hurt Markey in the case of it did with Lugar or others. But yeah, I think the real thing here is Kennedy miscalculated this. It really seems, from the day one till now, not understanding this. And yeah, I think Andrew does raise a fair point. I think, I think Kennedy was more planning on barnstorming, and once COVID happened, he had to readjust, and he never did. He really thought, he could run still a traditional campaign in the COVID era, and he did not. And it just, exuberated to a loss. And now Joe Kennedy, who very easily could have, everyone, Ayanna Pressley, someone did mention this, that, we'll never know if Ayanna Pressley would have ran against Joe Kennedy in another primary or whatnot. But now the green light is for her or Maura Healey to run for an open Warren seat if it comes up in 21 or 22, or Markey's seat in 2026 should he retire, since he will be
I think it would be more funny if Martha Coakley ran again.
That would certainly be a bit of a meme. By the way,
it would be more than a bit of a meme. I mean, that would be the full meme.
Well, I mean, we can have the senator.
by the way,
We can have the
just
senator.
to say we do have a tied precinct in the Senate race, a tied town, Montgomery, which is kind of just outside of Springfield, is, according to NYT, totally tied. 88 votes for Markey, 88 votes for Kennedy. Obviously, we've called it for Markey. He will continue to be the senator from Massachusetts. But, yeah, you always like to see when you see interesting stuff like that and you see ties. It's always kind of interesting.
Well, there's so many towns, it's easier to have a tied town than a tied county. So
Yeah.
some of these only have a handful of people living in them.
Yep.
Tell us Texas.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention real quick is we're not focusing on the GOP primary, but other outlets have called the race for Kevin O'Connor, beating Shiva Ayyadurai in the race. That's basically prevents a Joanne Perkins quality candidate from being the Republican nominee. It's a safe state. It doesn't matter who wins the primary, but you would prefer, someone who's not completely bonkers to win primaries in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, less crazy people are good.
Was Shiva, is he QAnon or not? I'm not sure. I'm asking a serious question.
I don't. Shiva has always been on the outskirts, so I don't know if he is, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was.
The fact that this is a question you have to ask is really something.
Yeah, that's true. Not gonna lie.
No, he claims he's not technically QAnon, but he's close. He claimed to have invented the email. He's spread coronavirus conspiracy theories, treatments, fake stuff.
Oh, he's basically the Massachusetts equivalent of someone like Hirsch Singh in New Jersey.
Probably, yeah. He specifically focused a lot on COVID and on treatments and problems along that line. But also, I wonder if the name, just the Kevin O'Connor name, it's just extremely I don't know if he's Catholic, but that's an extremely Irish Catholic name. A lot of those voters who previously might have voted for Democrats might be more akin to voting a Republican primary at this point. Maybe that would, some of those people would help deliver him a win. I mean, who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of times people who are not that interested in politics do just vote on, I hate to be so blunt about it, but they vote on name recognition, who they've seen more, who they like better. Sometimes they vote on looks. Sometimes they vote on names. Sometimes they just vote who's top of the list on the ballot.
Welcome to the Tennessee Democratic Party, which is how you have candidates there losing races. Just people, voters don't go into the ballot like they're A. I guess I'll vote for them.
Yeah, you
But
see
they're
that.
first on the ballot, so they have to be. They must think the candidates
A
are
lot
right.
of voters in the country, and this is not necessarily something we can change, but if people recognize voting is important and it's their civic duty, but they may not be particularly interested in politics and reading about candidates, then especially for these down ballot races, when you're not, president, most people care about, but down ballot races like this, just look at North Carolina with all their row offices. Do you think people honestly are really looking into which candidate is better once you get down to superintendent, court justice, treasurer, auditor?
Yeah. The
Auditor of
auditor.
the
We had a
6th
recruiting failure here. The Republicans here, we
He
had
nominated a criminal.
the
right?
auditor is vulnerable. Beth Wood was a vulnerable incumbent. She only narrowly won last time, but Republicans nominated a candidate who was listed first on the ballot. Only 2 candidates were running, and the guy who ran or won, listed first on the ballot, had basically no money and had criminal convictions on his record, which is just not ideal.
I think the
candidate with
guy they
money.
did nominate was charged with he got a restraining order because he was charged with stalking a woman, I think, or multiple.
And threatening people for money, like threatening basically, holding up people for money, which is obviously what you want out of your state auditor.
I mean, the last time interestingly enough, in Missouri, you had a guy named Al Hansen who actually lost in a blowout to Claire McCaskill in that auditor race, and I believe it was 2002. And basically in that race, Al Hansen said, "I've committed fraud." He said, "I've committed fraud, and that gives me the ability to understand how to prevent fraud and deception."
Well,
That was his message when he was running for auditor.
that's one hell of a way to appeal to the voter.
Well, he lost 61-33 or something, so it didn't work. I think he only won Billy Long's district in that southwestern corner of Missouri.
Oh, he's the guy with the auctioneer guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's had his own troubles, particularly with his dealings in Las Vegas. He's spent a lot of money on restaurants and gambling that was connected back to taxpayers. So, kind of another thing that hasn't really reflected very well on Billy Long.
But he's known for being able to have that voice.
Yeah, because he used to do that before he entered Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another one that was defeated in 2014 was Nick Rail in West Virginia's 3rd district. He had similar problems back in the 80s and 90s, and the Almanac back then said that's the only reason that a traditionally solid Democratic seat in the coal country, at least back then, would be at risk.
Yeah.
So he cleaned up his act because he had almost lost re-election.
And I heard for a long time, Republicans in that district didn't have a good candidate to go up against him. Like in 2010, I think Hall won pretty easily.
Yeah, he did. He was against a guy named Rick Snuffer, and Snuffer only got 46% of the vote. It was not a very good bid there. But you saw that in a lot of seats that would go on to flip in 2012 and 2014, like Arkansas 4. Mike Ross beat his opponent in 2010 by 20 points, and Dan Boren in Oklahoma 2 beat his opponent by. So there were some seats that Republicans had bad recruitment, even in 2010, that they just didn't seriously that they could have won because they were heavy McCain seats.
Well, even to a degree, I mean, I don't want to mention Richie Neal's district as being competitive, but they didn't challenge Richie Neal at all for every election in his tenure, pretty much, except for 2010, back when the district, if at the moment it would be more Republican than it was then. They lost it by 17, which is better than losing it by infinity, I guess, if you don't challenge a district at all. They didn't have it challenged it since, but there were a lot of races that were close in 2010 that
Just seat as well.
that wouldn't be close in the foreseeable future. Like some of the races in Northern Virginia, I think Jerry Connolly got pretty close to losing his district, if I recall right.
Yeah, he ran against a guy named Simeon, and he only won by 1.7%.
Yeah, and in 2014, Louise Slaughter, who was well known and kind of beloved, I think, by a lot of people in Congress, even on the Republican side, she got along very well. Specifically,
Yeah,
with
that
some
was
Republicans.
another really surprising
She
race.
narrowly won. I mean, she narrowly won in a Rochester
Yeah.
seat that's pretty Democratic. I mean, it's mostly just the county and the city.
And when you say pretty close, she literally beat Assini by 0.1%. It was 50.1 to 49.9. It is for Obama by double digits.
Yeah. 2014 was kind of a nuclear tier year for Democrats upstate. I mean, they went from having, I think, Republicans went from, 3 representatives to 9, something along that line.
Oh, it was bad for New York Democrats.
Yeah.
In 2014. It was basically like Armageddon.
Yeah. I mean, Republicans I think they had 1 or 2 representatives only at the start of the decade. And by the end, by now they obviously have fewer than 2014 and 2016. But, it's better than
such
1.
An fascinating evolution because after 2008, initially, like right after 2008, it was just one upstate Republican and then Pete King. That's it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And of course, Pete King is an institution. So I mean,
And ironically, that one state Republican resigned in the middle of 2009 to become the Secretary of the Army for President Obama. So they were left, I believe, the GOP a good chunk of 2010 without an upstate representative.
was
Yeah,
that,
and
was that the Doug Hoffman
Tom
seat?
Reed.
That was
And
Tom
it basically went to King.
Oh,
was the
Corning.
one.
That's the Corning area. Yeah, the southern tier.
So Tom Reed, like Tom Reed's
And-
district now.
Hmm. Elmira, Corning, all the areas along the Pennsylvania border, basically the northern portion.
John Catt.
Yeah, and obviously there was that other upset in 2008, the very narrow race where Eric Massa beat Randy Cole by like 1% in the 29th district. And that was traditionally Republican. That was the upset, but his career ended pretty quickly after that, after the sexual assault allegations came out. And then that seat
Mhm.
flipped to Tom Reed, who still represents it as the 23rd today.
Yeah,
But
and
for a
that-
brief
yeah.
time, it was held by a Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, New York's had some funky districts, to be fair. I mean, if you kind of look at it for a while, I think they had one that stretched kind of from Erie to Rochester, which was or
Oh, yeah.
Buffalo to Rochester, which
That
was
was-
the 28th.
That was Slaughter's seat, yeah.
Yeah. And then the 27th was, of course, had more Democratic. And then the 29th, 26th were now, ironically, if you draw that, now it's a strong Democratic gerrymander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then it was considered, I guess, a Republican, or it was the Republicans used to hold.
Well, it
I
was
think,
kind
the
of like a
27th,
dummy
actually.
mander when it was initially drawn prior to 2010. I mean, similarly in Pennsylvania, the 2006 midterms were kind of the first thing that cracked some of the 2002 GOP
Yeah.
dummy manders. I'm talking about states like Ohio, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
New York.
Well, Jack Quinn held it as a Republican for years. Or it was Tom Reynolds, and then Jack Quinn held it, and then Brian Higgins was the one who held it for most of the rest of the decade, and he was more of a
But-
conservative Democrat back then.
One of the most fascinating things about Ohio is their current map now is a strong GOP gerrymander, and it just doesn't yield any competitive elections. Not very interesting. But the map they had last decade was actually a GOP dummy mander. Started off with only four Democratic seats, pretty much all in urban areas. But then by the end of it, you had Charlie Wilson in the 6th. You had Zach Space. You had John Boschieri. You even had a seat around the Dayton area actually flipped. Oh, Mary Jo Kilroy won against Steve Stivers in 2008, and Steve
was hard
Dryhouse
for
in the
them.
Cincinnati area. So you basically went from that was probably one of the worst failures of a GOP gerrymander because prior to 2010, the Democrats had a strong presence in Ohio. Lots of competitive races.
Yeah, outside
cut-
of just the
they cut
urban
through-
areas.
They cut
Yeah, in
Columbus
rural
in half.
districts too.
Hmm.
Yeah, they cut
I mean,
Columbus
even
in
now,
half.
some
That
of those
was a
districts
big
are
disaster.
really narrow. If you look at them, they're a lot closer to R+3 or R+5 or even R+7 than a lot of other states.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Yeah,
razor
like Dennis
thin.
Kucinich district.
Yeah.
I think under the current map, Sherrod Brown, I think, won a bunch of those districts. Like, I think he won the 14th, the 12th, the 10th, and the 1st.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking
Just to
seats
give a
like
quick
yeah.
update on the 4th district. I know we might wrap up here soon, just on the stream wise, but just a quick update on the 4th district. Jesse Mermel lead has dropped down to 30% on the nose. Jake Auchincloss is still her top opponent with 22.2% of the vote. Becky Grossman in 3rd with 15% of the vote. Then, like we've said a couple of times now, Mermel's area is kind of it's in right now. Where a lot of the remaining land is Auchincloss is going to continue to tighten as it goes on. I will be on the Twitter account updating y'all. If you follow us on Twitter at Elections Daily, there we will still have updates for you there, even as we wrap up this stream.
And also in some Massachusetts Senate news, Joe Kennedy has called and conceded to Ed Markey, and it just for those for our viewers to be aware of that.
Hmm. Yeah, it appears outside of that corridor from Springfield to Worcester. I don't know how I made the mistake, but
It's okay, Eric. I mean, basically, the Massachusetts town names are taken from proper British names that make sense. And
Yeah.
pronounced and just ruined.
Yeah, it's like the spellings. It still irks me that Pennsylvania spells Centre County the British way. I cringe whenever I see that
So
spelling.
that's what we do. It's how
No,
we do.
Exactly. I was going to say Century County deserves to have that name there, and it's based. They still have it that way.
Yeah, it is extraordinary.
I just want to say,
Okay,
be careful.
listen, we
So
there-
big.
I just
there's
wanna
no
say be careful
use
about what you say about the
debating
British.
about the difference between like the minor trite difference between British and American spellings now, because the whole
I
point.
mean,
We're having some
I know,
fun
but-
here. It's-
No, I know, but the whole point is English as a whole is barely at all spelled phonetically, so there's no point arguing because 70%
Well,
of our words
sure,
don't
Iris,
make any
if you want
sense.
to say that, sure, go ahead.
Right, be careful what you say about the British.
I was going to say we have one.
so here in Maryland, we also have a Worcester County, but we also have a Dorchester County.
Mhm.
And the Dorchester is spelled with an H, so it's
That's how
Actually,
you tell.
Oh no,
Yeah.
the comment section.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started about French words because they're even worse than English words.
You only pronounce two of the
We do not
letters.
recognize the French here. We have an English guy in the chat. We do not recognize.
Sorry, yeah, we only recognize phonetic languages, so French and English
Yeah.
are gone.
But I mean, the closest I think North Carolina has to like a weird county is like Chatham County, which is spelled Chatham, or like you would spell it Chatham, but it's Chatham. And then we have I can't remember if it's Beaufort
We
or Beaufort.
have a Gloucester
it depends
County in
on
New
which North
Jersey,
Carolina and
too.
South Carolina are. Yeah,
'Cause
but
we-
there's I think the North Carolina and South Carolina Beauforts pronounce their names differently. I'm pretty sure. I
We
just can't remember
have-
which one is which.
No, I read about that in the almanac. Actually, it said some people say Beaufort, some people say Beaufort.
There's actually people in the Outer Banks who have been there so long, they live there forever, and they sound like they have British accents. It's
The North Carolina one's Beaufort. It's where my grandpa's from.
yeah, Beaufort. Yeah.
At least it's,
Yeah,
it's not the
Well,
Welsh.
New Jersey has Gloucester County, so
At least it's not
I
the.
thought it was Gloucester. It's Gloucester. I thought it was Gloucester.
I just always
no,
call
my
it.
boss says like kind of he says more like Gloucester.
At least it's not the Welsh towns that have 20 long letter names.
Well, no, if it's Welsh, it'll have like 8 consonant letters next to each other in weird patterns and don't make any sense and can't be pronounced. It'll have like double C's, WW's.
Mhm.
And it's pronounced Larry.
I know why our counties are so much better. Most of our counties were established after the Revolutionary War, so most of them don't have colonial names. Like the oldest county is, I believe, it's Alamance County, which is just it's pronounced the way you spell it. I mean,
I wonder if there are any counties in the United States named after Bannister Tarleton. I really doubt it, but because I was wondering about South Carolina because he was the very infamous British general during the Revolutionary War. So I feel like if there was a Tarleton County, I doubt one exists in the whole country.
I mean, you never know. There's still, we still have, counties and stuff named after. I mean, there's still things that have Arnold in them. I mean, it's not entirely gone.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, but generally, the only controversial names now are definitely counties named after Confederate figures.
Mhm.
So I just want to tell you guys real quick before we wrap up. We're going to be wrapping up now, but stick with Joe for updates on the Twitter account. And thank you again for watching our Massachusetts election coverage. We really appreciate every time we get your viewership on here. All of us appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know it kind of devolves once we get most of our calls out there, but this was an exciting primary, and essentially this is definitely the most high-profile night left until November. So thank you guys, the viewers. At the end of the day, we appreciate you the most. So thank you.
It's the end of an era. And
Yeah, we'll never
Iris,
have to hear about this primary again.
And on a quick note, This is a very odd year where a Kennedy and a Bush lose in primaries.
Changing of the political guard.
And folks, yeah, I mean, get ready, but folks, get ready for November. About almost 60 days away now, basically. So get ready to go here.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for there to be another hurricane that destroys the New Jersey power infrastructure.
Just on election day.
But I'd be done. I would be okay. Well, but thank you again, guys, for watching. We